All right, this is my analysis for the destruction of Sennacherib. And this poem is a description of the Assyrian siege on Jerusalem in 701 BC. To start off, stanza number 1 is focusing on the people of Jerusalem's intimidation for the Assyrians. The Syrian king Sennacherib is described like a wolf in the fold, wolves being very intimidating, and his cohorts gleaming in purple and gold, representing the royal colors of the time, representing that the Assyrians were the most powerful empire in the region. The sheen of their spears being like knights in the sea, and the blue wave rolling nightly on deep Galilee, are a reflection of the vast amount of soldiers that were there, 185,000 according to the biblical account. And the nightly on deep Galilee stands to represent the fact that they were waiting there for several nights, for weeks even, and camping outside of Jerusalem. And so in stanza 2, to continue with that metaphor, the soldiers are depicted as leaves of a forest when the summer is green, and leaves representing the vast amount of leaves that are in a forest. You know, in summer when trees are fully blooming, there's just thousands upon thousands of leaves representing the thousands upon thousands of Assyrian soldiers. Banners at sunset were seen, representing the glory of the soldiers. They were standing in glory in the midst of the sun. And yet there's a contrast between that and the third line where it says, the forest when autumn hath blown. So the leaves are getting blown away. And that will be reflected in the third paragraph when the angel of death is revealed. But I think there's a metaphor here that the host on the morrow lay withered and strown. So this day, summer is going to autumn, and autumn is transitioning to winter, where there is a lifeless tree, no life available, the transition of seasons. Continuing from the second paragraph to the third one, the angel of death is finally revealed with his wings on blast, depicting the massacre, basically, of the Assyrians by this angel sent from God after the king of Jerusalem, Hezekiah, prayed to God for help. And we see the enemies wax deadly and chill. Their hearts were once heaved, and they ever grew still. Almost immediately, the angel slaughtered them. They were all laid to rest so quickly, as represented by the third stanza, whereas beforehand they were depicted in glory. So how quickly the angel would defeat them in spite of them being royal and the greatest empire in the region at the time. And so between paragraphs 4 and 5 are two contrasting metaphors. One in stanza 4, that is depicting a horse fighting gallantly against death, where it's breathing in pride. The pride represents all of the glory of the horse. The horse is fighting with pride against death, fighting desperately to survive. And in stanza 5, there is an opposite effect. The rider of the horse is distorted and pale. The dew on his brow and the rust on his mail, depicting someone laying there. For rust to develop, there has to be armor laying for a while. And for dew to develop, the body must be left undisturbed on the ground, laying pretty much flatly. So while the horse was fighting so hard, the rider was already dead. The Assyrians were already dead. It was so quickly that, as we see here, the tents were silent, the lances were unlifted, and the trumpet unblown. The Assyrians put up absolutely no fight against the angel. That is how swift he laid them to rest. And so the last stanza is basically a threefold metaphor for the enemies of God, the enemies of the Jews, who are represented here. It speaks of Ashur, the temple of Baal, and the might of the Gentile. Ashur being the god of Assyria, which in the name represents Assyria. Baal being the god within the Bible that is often depicted in tandem with the devil and with those demonic things that the Jewish people would oppose. And finally, the Gentile, which Gentile was a name assigned to anyone who was not a Jew. All of them are melted in like snow in the glance of the Lord, meaning that each one of them, each one of these people who opposes God, who is an enemy of God, they are nothing by just his glance. This angel going out and defeating all of them was just a swing. Even compared to God is nothing, because all God must do to defeat their enemies is simply glance. So this poem is an encapsulation and a representation of the might of the Jewish God, and is an ode by Lord Byron to the Jewish faith, because in spite of their great enemies that they have faced historically, they have still persisted in their survival. So as an ode to the Jewish faith and a nod to the strength and might and glory of the Jewish God, Yahweh, this poem represents Jewish perseverance and the might of the Abrahamic God.